A 26-year-old art curator from Portland married a mysterious 60-year-old billionaire in a lavish ceremony that captivated the media and shocked their respective social circles. But just 2 days into their honeymoon at his secluded mountain estate, she discovers something hidden behind a false wall in his private study that reveals a terrifying truth about her new husband's real identity and the deadly secret that has been haunting him for over a decade. Victoria Hartwell thought she had found her Prince Charming when Marcus Blackwood swept her off her feet with his quiet confidence and generous heart. But what started as a fairy tale romance would soon become a fight for survival that would test every ounce of courage she never knew she possessed. The discovery she made that Tuesday afternoon would not only shatter everything she believed about the man she married, but it would also thrust her into a dangerous world where million-dollar contracts meant nothing compared to the price on someone's head. Victoria Hartwell spent her days surrounded by beauty at the Portland Museum of Contemporary Arts, where she worked as a senior curator specializing in emerging artists. At 26, she had already established herself as someone with an exceptional eye for talent, but her personal life was far from the masterpieces she showcased daily. Student loans from her art history degree at Northwestern University consumed most of her modest salary, and her mother's recent cancer diagnosis had drained what little savings she had managed to accumulate. The medical bills kept piling up despite insurance coverage, and Victoria found herself working extra shifts at weekend art shows just to make ends meet. Her small apartment in the Pearl District reflected her financial struggles, furnished with thrift store finds and hand-me-downs from friends, but decorated with prints from artists whose originals she could only dream of owning. Marcus Blackwood entered her world on a rainy Thursday evening in October during the museum's annual charity auction. Victoria was managing the event, ensuring that each piece was presented perfectly and that the wealthy donors felt appreciated for their contributions. She noticed him immediately, not because of his expensive suit or the way other patrons seemed to gravitate toward him, but because he stood quietly in front of a painting by an unknown local artist, studying it with genuine interest, while everyone else focused on the big-name pieces. The painting was a haunting portrait of a woman looking over her shoulder, painted in muted blues and grays. It had been donated by the artist herself, a struggling single mother trying to make rent. Victoria had fought to include it in the auction, despite her supervisor's concerns that it would not generate significant bids. "She captures something most people miss," Marcus said, when Victoria approached to answer what she assumed was a question about the piece. "What do you see?" Victoria asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. "Fear and hope existing in the same moment," he replied, never taking his eyes off the canvas. "The way she looks back suggests she is running from something, but the light in her eyes says she believes she can escape it." That conversation lasted 3 hours. Long after the auction ended and the last donor had departed, Victoria and Marcus sat in the empty gallery, sharing stories about art, life, and the weight of expectations that others place on us. She learned that he had built his fortune in technology, developing security software that protected major corporations from cyber threats. He was self-made, having grown up in foster care before earning scholarships that led to a computer science degree from Stanford. Marcus purchased the painting that night for $50,000, 20 times its estimated value. But instead of taking it home, he donated it back to the museum with a request that it remain on permanent display in the emerging artists' wing. Their first official date happened 3 days later at a small Italian restaurant in northeast Portland. Marcus arrived in a modest sedan rather than the luxury car Victoria expected, and he insisted on splitting the check. Despite his obvious wealth, he asked thoughtful questions about her work, her family, and her dreams, listening with an intensity that made her feel like the most important person in the world. "Money changes people," he told her over dessert. "I have learned that the best way to stay grounded is to remember what life was like before I had any." Over the following weeks, their relationship developed at a pace that surprised them both. Marcus was unlike any wealthy person Victoria had ever encountered. He cooked dinner for her in his surprisingly modest downtown condominium, drove himself everywhere, and seemed genuinely uncomfortable with excessive displays of wealth. His philanthropy was extensive but private. He funded scholarships for foster children, supported local food banks, and quietly paid medical bills for families who could not afford treatment. The condo where he lived was elegant, but understated, filled with books about technology, philosophy, and art. The only indication of his vast wealth was the sophisticated security system and the fact that he never seemed to worry about money. When Victoria mentioned her mother's medical situation during their 6th date, Marcus simply asked for the hospital's billing department number and handled the entire outstanding balance without fanfare. "Why would you do that?" Victoria asked, overwhelmed by his generosity. "Because I can," he replied simply. "And because watching someone you care about suffer when you have the power to help is its own form of suffering." Their engagement happened on Christmas Eve, just 2 months after they met. Marcus proposed during a quiet dinner at his condo, presenting a vintage ring that had belonged to his foster mother, the only woman who had ever truly believed in him. The ring was beautiful but not ostentatious, reflecting his preference for meaningful gestures over expensive displays. "I know this seems fast," he said as he knelt beside her chair. "But I have learned that when you find something real, you do not waste time pretending it might not be special." Victoria said yes, without hesitation. Something about Marcus felt like coming home after a long journey. He understood her passion for art, supported her career ambitions, and treated her with a respect and tenderness she had never experienced before. Their conversations could last until sunrise, covering everything from childhood dreams to philosophical debates about the nature of happiness. The wedding took place 6 weeks later, at a private estate in the Columbia River Gorge. Marcus had wanted something small and intimate, but Victoria's excitement about celebrating their love led to a guest list of nearly 200 people. The ceremony was elegant without being excessive: white flowers, string quartet, locally sourced dinner menu that reflected their shared values about supporting community businesses. Victoria wore her grandmother's wedding dress, altered to fit her petite frame, while Marcus chose a classic black tuxedo rather than anything flashy. During their vows, he promised to protect her happiness with the same dedication he brought to everything else in his life, while she vowed to love him for who he was rather than what he could provide. The reception lasted until midnight, filled with dancing, heartfelt toasts, and the kind of joy that makes everyone present believe in love again. Victoria's mother, whose health had improved dramatically thanks to Marcus's intervention, gave a speech about how grateful she was to see her daughter find someone who cherished her spirit. "You have given my daughter something I never could," she said, addressing Marcus directly: "the freedom to pursue her dreams without fear." As they departed for their honeymoon at Marcus's private estate in the Cascade Mountains, Victoria felt like the luckiest woman alive. She had married her best friend, her greatest supporter, and the love of her life. The future stretched ahead of them, filled with infinite possibilities. The mountain estate sat nestled among towering Douglas firs and pristine meadows, accessible only by a private road that wound through 20 miles of untouched wilderness. Victoria had expected luxury, but the reality exceeded even her imagination. A sprawling log and stone mansion with floor-to-ceiling windows that captured breathtaking views of snow-capped peaks and crystal-clear lakes. "This is where I come to think," Marcus explained as he carried her over the threshold on their wedding night. "The nearest neighbor is 40 miles away, and cell phone service requires the satellite system I had installed." The isolation felt romantic at first. They spent their first morning exploring the property hand in hand, discovering hidden gardens, a private lake with a dock perfect for swimming, and walking trails that led to waterfalls and meadows filled with wildflowers. Marcus showed her his workshop in the basement, a high-tech laboratory where he continued developing security software even during vacation. "I hope you do not mind that I still work a little," he said, gesturing toward multiple computer screens and servers humming quietly in climate-controlled cases. "Old habits from my bachelor days." Victoria assured him that she understood his dedication. After all, she often found herself sketching or researching artists even during her time off. Passion for one's work was something they shared, and she respected his need to stay connected to the projects that had built his success. But by their second day, small details began accumulating that made Victoria increasingly uncomfortable. Marcus received phone calls at odd hours, 3 in the morning during dinner, while they were hiking. Each time he would excuse himself and walk far enough away that she could not hear the conversations, returning with apologies but no explanations. "Business emergency," he would say with a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. "You know how demanding clients can be." The calls became more frequent as Tuesday progressed. Victoria counted 7 interruptions before noon, each lasting 15 to 20 minutes, and leaving Marcus visibly tense despite his attempts to hide his concern. When she suggested they turn off his phones for the rest of their honeymoon, he gently deflected the idea. Just a few more days, he promised. There is a major contract negotiation happening, and my input is crucial. Victoria tried to be understanding, but something felt wrong. The Marcus she had fallen in love with was always present and focused when they were together. This distracted version was like a stranger wearing her husband's face. Tuesday afternoon brought visitors. 2 men in expensive suits who arrived in a black sedan with tinted windows. Victoria watched from the kitchen window as Marcus met them on the front porch, his body language tense and defensive. The conversation appeared heated, with frequent gesturing and raised voices, though she could not make out the words. "Who were those men?" she asked, when Marcus returned to the house 40 minutes later. "Business associates," he replied, but his hands were shaking slightly as he poured himself a glass of water. "Nothing to worry about. They seemed upset about something," Victoria pressed gently. "Negotiations can get intense," Marcus said, pulling her into a hug that felt more desperate than affectionate. "I am sorry this is interfering with our honeymoon. Things should calm down soon." But things did not calm down. More calls came throughout the evening, each one sending Marcus into his study with the door firmly closed. Victoria could hear his voice through the walls. Sometimes angry, sometimes pleading, always urgent. Sleep proved impossible, with the constant interruptions, and by Wednesday morning, dark circles shadowed Marcus's eyes. "Maybe we should go back to Portland," Victoria suggested over breakfast. "You could handle whatever this is properly, and we could take a real honeymoon later when things settle down." "No," Marcus said quickly, then caught himself and softened his tone. I prefer we stay here. This place is special to me, and I want to share it with you properly. The business situation will resolve itself in a day or 2, but his reassurance felt hollow. Marcus barely touched his food, jumping at every sound from outside. When Victoria suggested a hike to the waterfall they had discovered the day before, he declined, claiming he needed to monitor his computer systems. "The security software requires constant updates," he explained, "especially with this new contract pending." Victoria spent Wednesday morning alone, walking the property and trying to shake the growing sense that she had married a stranger. The man she loved was thoughtful, present, and honest about his feelings. This version of Marcus was secretive, anxious, and clearly hiding something significant from her. Her unease deepened when she discovered that several rooms in the house were locked. Not just Marcus's study, but a bedroom on the 2nd floor, a storage area in the basement, and what appeared to be an office near the main entrance. When she mentioned the locked doors during lunch, Marcus claimed they contained boring business files and seasonal equipment. "Nothing interesting," he said with that same forced smile. "Just clutter I have never bothered to organize properly." But if they contained nothing important, why lock them? And why did Marcus check his phone compulsively every few minutes, as if expecting bad news? Wednesday evening brought the breaking point. Victoria was reading in the living room when she heard Marcus shouting in his study. Not just raised voice for emphasis, but genuine anger and fear. "You cannot do this." His voice carried through the closed door. "We had an agreement. I have fulfilled my obligations." Silence followed. Then the sound of something heavy hitting the wall. Victoria crept closer to the study door, her heart pounding as she strained to hear more. "2 more days," Marcus said, his voice now pleading. "That is all I need. 2 more days, and then I will come in." "Come in where?" Victoria pressed her ear against the door, desperate to understand what was happening to her husband. "I understand the risks," Marcus continued, "but if you move too soon, everything we have worked for will be destroyed. The whole operation will collapse." "Operation? What operation?" Victoria's mind raced through possibilities, none of them reassuring. Was Marcus involved in something illegal? Was he in danger? Were they both in danger? The call ended abruptly, followed by several minutes of silence. When Marcus finally emerged from the study, his face was pale and drawn. He found Victoria in the living room, trying to appear calm while her thoughts raced. "Everything all right?" she asked, though the answer was obviously no. "Fine," Marcus lied. just a difficult client who cannot understand technical limitations. That night, Victoria lay awake listening to Marcus toss and turn beside her. Several times she heard him get up and walk to the window, standing there for long minutes before returning to bed. When she pretended to be asleep, she could hear him whispering into his phone, though she could not make out the words. By Thursday morning, Victoria knew she could not continue pretending everything was normal. Her husband was clearly in some kind of serious trouble, and his refusal to confide in her was creating a wall between them that threatened everything they had built together. "Marcus," she said over coffee, reaching across the table to take his hand. "Whatever is happening, we can face it together. But you have to trust me enough to tell me the truth." For a moment, she thought he might confess everything. His eyes filled with something that looked like relief, and he squeezed her fingers tightly. "Victoria," he began, then stopped as his phone rang again. The caller ID showed only a number, no name. "Do not answer it," Victoria pleaded. "Please, just this once, let it go to voicemail." But Marcus was already standing, walking toward his study with phone in hand. "I have to take this," he said apologetically. "But after this call, I promise we will talk." That was when Victoria decided she could not wait any longer for her husband to trust her with the truth. If he would not tell her what was wrong, she would have to find out for herself. Thursday afternoon found Victoria alone again, while Marcus dealt with yet another urgent business matter in his locked study. The isolation that had seemed romantic 3 days earlier now felt oppressive and frightening. The beautiful mountain estate had become a prison where her husband kept secrets that were eating him alive, and she was powerless to help because he would not let her in. She had married Marcus because of his honesty and transparency. During their courtship, he had shared stories about his difficult childhood, his struggles building his business, and his fears about letting people get too close. That openness had made her feel safe and cherished. This secretive stranger felt like a betrayal of everything she thought she knew about their relationship. The sound of Marcus's raised voice carried through the house again, punctuated by long silences that suggested he was listening to someone delivering unwelcome news. Victoria could not make out individual words, but the tone conveyed desperation and barely controlled panic. Her breaking point came when she heard something crash in the study, followed by Marcus cursing with a vehemence that made her jump. She had never heard him lose control like that, and the sound made her realize that whatever was happening was escalating beyond his ability to manage alone. Standing outside the study door, Victoria made a decision that would change everything. She could not help her husband if she did not understand what they were facing. If Marcus would not trust her with the truth, she would have to find it herself. The house had multiple levels, and Victoria remembered seeing a door near the basement workshop that Marcus had mentioned was locked. If he was hiding something significant, it might be in one of those secured areas rather than in his study, where he spent so much time on the phone. Moving quietly through the house, Victoria made her way to the basement workshop. The high-tech equipment hummed softly in the background as she examined the locked door she had noticed earlier. Unlike the other locks in the house, this one was electronic, a keypad system that required a numerical code. Victoria tried obvious combinations first: Marcus's birthday, their wedding date, the day they met. None worked. She was about to give up when she remembered the painting that had brought them together, the portrait of the woman looking over her shoulder that Marcus had purchased for $50,000. The artist had signed it with a date, 10/15/2010. October 15th, 2010. Victoria typed in the numbers, 1015-2010. The lock clicked open. Behind the door was not another room, but a staircase leading to a sub-basement she had not known existed. Victoria hesitated, knowing that what she was about to do violated her husband's privacy in a fundamental way, but the fear in Marcus's voice during his recent phone calls outweighed her guilt about snooping. The staircase led to a windowless room that looked like something from a spy movie. Multiple computer monitors lined one wall, displaying news feeds, security camera footage, and what appeared to be encrypted communications. File cabinets filled another wall, secured with additional electronic locks, but it was the far wall that made Victoria's breath catch in her throat. Photographs covered the entire surface: surveillance shots, newspaper clippings, official-looking documents, and detailed maps, all centered around one man who looked exactly like her husband, but went by a completely different name, David Chen, former Chief Technology Officer of Meridian Defense Solutions. Victoria stared at the photos, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The man in the images was definitely Marcus. Same face, same build, same distinctive scar on his left hand from a childhood accident he had described to her. But according to the documents surrounding his photo, David Chen had died in a car accident 3 years ago, except he obviously had not died. He had become Marcus Blackwood. With trembling hands, Victoria examined the newspaper clippings more closely. The headlines painted a picture that made her stomach turn. Defense contractor whistleblower, missing. Meridian executive feared dead after exposing corruption. Federal investigations stalled by missing witness. According to the articles, David Chen had discovered that his former company was selling classified military technology to foreign governments, profiting from deals that compromised national security. When he tried to report the illegal activities through proper channels, he learned that the corruption extended into federal agencies responsible for oversight. Realizing that his life was in danger, Chen had gathered evidence and approached the Federal Bureau of Investigation directly. The documents on the wall showed email exchanges between Chen and federal agents, detailing plans for him to testify before Congress about the illegal weapons sales. But before Chen could testify, there had been 3 attempts on his life. The final attempt, a car bomb that destroyed his vehicle and was reported as a fatal accident, had actually been staged by federal agents to make Meridian's executives believe their problem was solved. David Chen had been placed in the Witness Protection Program, given a new identity as Marcus Blackwood, and relocated to Portland, where he could start over, while federal investigators built their case against Meridian Defense Solutions. Victoria sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she had discovered. Her husband was not just wealthy and secretive. He was a federal witness whose testimony could bring down a massive defense contracting conspiracy. The phone calls, the visitors, the locked rooms, the constant anxiety, it all made horrible sense now. But why was this happening now, on their honeymoon? And why was Marcus so frightened? Victoria found her answer in a folder labeled Current Threat Assessment that contained documents dated just days before their wedding. Meridian Defense Solutions had discovered that David Chen was still alive. Their executives had learned about his new identity and were actively hunting for him. The federal agents protecting Marcus had wanted to relocate him immediately, but he had insisted on staying in Portland long enough to marry Victoria. Against their better judgment, they had agreed to let him have the wedding, but with the understanding that he would enter deeper protection immediately afterward. That was why they were at this isolated estate. It was not just a honeymoon location, it was a safe house where Marcus was supposed to wait until federal agents could establish a new identity and relocation plan. But something had gone wrong. The most recent documents showed that Meridian's operatives were closing in faster than expected. They had traced Marcus to the estate, and federal agents were running out of time to extract him safely. The phone calls were not about business contracts. They were desperate consultations with federal marshals who were trying to keep Marcus alive, long enough to testify against one of the most powerful defense contractors in the country. Victoria's hands shook as she read the final document in the folder, a message received just that morning. Meridian operatives were en route to the estate. Marcus had perhaps 6 hours before they arrived, and the federal agents assigned to protect him were still 12 hours away. The man she had married was about to be murdered by corporate assassins, and she was the only person who could help him. But there was more. Victoria discovered a second folder labeled Victoria Hartwell, Security Assessment. Her stomach dropped as she realized that federal agents had investigated her thoroughly before allowing Marcus to proceed with their relationship. The file contained everything: her financial records, employment history, family medical information, even photographs taken without her knowledge during their courtship. The agents had concluded that she was not a security risk, but they had also determined that involving her in Marcus's situation would endanger both their lives. That was why Marcus had not told her the truth. He was not just protecting his own cover, he was protecting her from becoming a target. Victoria heard footsteps on the stairs above and quickly closed the folders. Marcus's voice carried down from the main floor, still tense but closer than before. He was finishing another call and would probably come looking for her soon. She had perhaps minutes to decide what to do with the information she had discovered. She could pretend she had never found the secret room, let Marcus continue trying to protect her from the truth, and hope that federal agents arrived in time to save them both. Or she could confront her husband with what she knew and demand to be included in whatever plan would keep them alive. Looking at the photographs of the man she loved, David Chen Marcus Blackwood, whoever he really was, Victoria realized that her choice had already been made. She had not married him for his money or his false identity. She had married him because of his courage in standing up for what was right, even when it cost him everything. If Meridian Defense Solutions wanted to kill her husband for being brave enough to expose their crimes, they would have to go through her first. Victoria quickly photographed the most important documents with her phone, then carefully returned everything to its original position. She needed Marcus to trust her with the truth, but she also needed him to believe that telling her was his decision, not something forced on him by her discovery of his secrets. As she climbed the stairs back to the main house, Victoria heard Marcus ending another phone call. This time, instead of the anger and fear that had characterized his recent conversations, his voice carried resignation and something that sounded like goodbye. "I understand," he was saying as she reached the top of the stairs. "Yes, I will tell her. No, I do not think she will forgive me, but she deserves to know before." Before what? Victoria hurried toward the study, no longer caring if Marcus knew she had been listening. Whatever was about to happen, they would face it together, with honesty between them for the first time since their wedding. She knocked on the study door, then opened it without waiting for permission. "Marcus," she said, surprised by how calm her voice sounded, "we need to talk, and this time I need you to tell me everything." Marcus looked up from his desk, phone still in hand, and Victoria saw her own determination reflected in his eyes. The time for secrets was over. Their survival depended on trust, and trust required truth. "Yes," he said softly, ending his call and setting the phone aside. "It is time you knew who you really married." Marcus led Victoria to the living room, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the mountain wilderness that had become their sanctuary and potential tomb. Late afternoon sunlight streamed through the glass, creating patterns on the hardwood floor that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. "My real name is David Chen," Marcus began, his voice steady, despite the fear Victoria could see in his eyes. 3 years ago, I discovered that my employer was selling classified military technology to foreign governments. When I tried to report it, I learned that the corruption went deeper than I could have imagined." Victoria took his hands in hers, squeezing gently to encourage him to continue. She already knew most of what he was about to tell her, but hearing him choose to trust her with the truth felt like getting her real husband back. "They tried to kill me 3 times, Marcus continued. The last attempt was supposed to succeed. Federal agents staged my death and gave me a new identity, but the people I was hiding from have found me. They know who I am, they know where we are, and they are coming." "How long do we have?" Victoria asked, proud that her voice remained calm. Marcus's eyes widened at her composed response. He had clearly expected tears, panic, or accusations about the lies he had told her. "Federal agents estimate 4 to 6 hours before Meridian operatives reach the estate," he said. "My handlers want me to leave immediately for a new safe house, but, Victoria prompted. "But they cannot guarantee your safety if you come with me," Marcus admitted, his voice breaking slightly. "And I cannot guarantee your safety if you stay here alone. I have put you in an impossible situation because I was selfish enough to want a normal life." Victoria stood and walked to the window, looking out at the wilderness that surrounded them. The nearest neighbor was 40 miles away. Cell phone service required satellite connection, and the only road in or out was easily monitored. They were trapped, but they were also hidden. "What if we do not run?" she asked quietly. "What do you mean?" Victoria turned back to face her husband, an idea forming that was either brilliant or completely insane. "You said these people think they know where we are," she said. "But they are expecting to find David Chen hiding with federal protection. They are not expecting to find Marcus Blackwood with his new wife, who knows exactly who they are and what they want." Marcus shook his head immediately. "Victoria, these are not corporate executives in expensive suits. These are professional killers who will not hesitate to eliminate anyone who gets in their way. I know, Victoria said calmly. I found your hidden room. I read the files. I know exactly what we are dealing with. The shock on Marcus's face was almost comical. You found. How did... The painting, Victoria said with a small smile. The date the artist signed it. You always said that painting brought us together. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, processing not just that she had discovered his secrets, but that she was still standing there, still holding his hands, still talking about we, instead of running away from the danger he had brought into her life. You could leave, he said softly. Drive down the mountain right now. Go back to Portland. Pretend this never happened. They have no reason to hurt you if you are not with me, and spend the rest of my life wondering if you are alive or dead. Victoria shook her head firmly. Not happening. We promised to face everything together, and I meant that promise even if I did not know what everything would include. So what are you suggesting? Victoria walked to Marcus's laptop and opened the security software that monitored the perimeter of the estate. Multiple cameras showed empty forest and meadows. But she knew that would change soon. You built security software, she said. This house has a sophisticated system. We know they are coming, but they do not know that we know. That gives us an advantage. Victoria, I appreciate your courage, but these people are trained professionals. So are you, she countered. You have been staying ahead of them for 3 years, and I spent 6 months managing security for art exhibitions where individual pieces were worth millions of dollars. I know how to protect valuable things from people who want to steal them. Marcus looked at his wife with new understanding. The quiet, thoughtful woman he had fallen in love with was revealing a strength and determination he had never imagined. What did you have in mind? Victoria spent the next hour outlining a plan that was part home security, part psychological warfare, and part theater. If Meridian operatives were expecting to find a frightened witness hiding in a remote cabin, she would give them something completely different. Marcus used his technical expertise to modify the estate's security system, creating multiple false readings and setting up remote triggers for lights and sounds throughout the property. Victoria arranged furniture and personal items to create the illusion that they were living normally, unaware of any threat. The key is making them believe they have the wrong location, Victoria explained as they worked. If they think this is just a normal honeymoon couple with no connection to David Chen, they might move on to search elsewhere. And if they do not buy the deception, Victoria showed Marcus the emergency plan she had developed. Multiple escape routes through the forest, supply caches hidden around the property, and communication protocols with federal agents who were racing to reach them. Then we run, and we keep running, until help arrives. As evening approached, the security cameras detected movement at the perimeter of the property. 3 vehicles had stopped at the base of the mountain road, their occupants scanning the area with professional equipment. Victoria and Marcus watched the monitors from the basement workshop, their hearts pounding as the moment of truth approached. Everything depended on their ability to convince trained killers that they were harmless honeymooners who posed no threat to anyone. Remember, Victoria whispered as footsteps crunched on gravel outside. You are Marcus Blackwood, successful tech entrepreneur on your honeymoon. I am your new wife who thinks your biggest secret is that you sometimes work too much. The doorbell rang. Marcus answered the door, with Victoria beside him, both wearing robes over casual clothes, as if they had been relaxing by the fireplace. 3 men in expensive suits stood on the porch, their eyes scanning constantly for threats. Mr. Blackwood? The lead man asked politely. We are sorry to disturb your honeymoon, but we are investigating a security breach at one of our client companies. We have reason to believe the person we are looking for might be hiding in this area. Of course, Marcus replied with perfect confusion. Though I cannot imagine why anyone would choose to hide up here. The isolation is wonderful for romance, but terrible if you need supplies or medical attention. Victoria played her part perfectly, looking appropriately concerned but not frightened. Is there some kind of dangerous person loose in the mountains? Should we be worried? Nothing like that, the man assured her. Just a corporate espionage case. Someone stole some computer files and disappeared, probably harmless, but our client is eager to recover their property. For 20 minutes the operatives questioned Marcus and Victoria about their stay at the estate, any unusual activity they might have noticed, and whether they had seen any other people in the area. Both answered honestly about everything except their true identities, describing their honeymoon activities and expressing appropriate concern about security. "Well, we appreciate your cooperation," the lead operative finally said. "Enjoy the rest of your stay. The mountains are beautiful this time of year." Victoria and Marcus watched from the window as the three vehicles disappeared down the mountain road. They waited another hour before celebrating, afraid to believe that their deception had actually worked. They believed us," Victoria said incredulously. "Professional killers believed that we were just normal people." "You were incredible," Marcus replied, pulling her into his arms. "I have never seen anything like the way you handled that situation." "We handled it," Victoria corrected. "Together." Federal agents arrived 6 hours later to find Marcus and Victoria safe, unharmed, and more deeply connected than ever. The experience of facing mortal danger together had stripped away the last barriers between them, creating a foundation of trust and partnership that would define their marriage for decades to come. Marcus testified before Congress 2 months later, his evidence leading to the conviction of 12 Meridian Defense Solutions executives and the exposure of a corruption network that had compromised national security for over a decade. Victoria sat in the gallery every day of the proceedings, proud of her husband's courage and grateful for the opportunity to support him through the most difficult period of his life. They kept the estate in the mountains, returning there every year, on their anniversary, to remember the weekend when they learned that love is not just about sharing happiness, but about choosing to face danger together when the world becomes threatening. Victoria never returned to her job at the Portland Museum. Instead, she and Marcus established a foundation that provides security and legal support for corporate whistleblowers, helping other people find the courage to speak truth to power without sacrificing their safety or their families. "You saved my life," Marcus told her on their first anniversary, as they stood on the same porch where Meridian operatives had questioned them 12 months earlier. "We saved each other," Victoria replied, and she meant it. Marcus had given her financial security and introduced her to a world of possibilities she had never imagined. But more importantly, he had shown her that she possessed strength and courage she never knew existed. Their marriage became a partnership in the truest sense, two people who had chosen to build something together that was stronger than either could have created alone. The fairy tale romance had become something better, a real relationship based on honesty, trust, and the knowledge that they could face anything as long as they faced it together. The life lessons learned during those terrifying 48 hours shaped everything that followed. Victoria discovered that security comes not from avoiding danger, but from having someone beside you who will never abandon you when circumstances become difficult. Marcus learned that true intimacy requires vulnerability, and that sharing his burdens made him stronger rather than weaker. Together they built a life that honored both the romance that brought them together and the reality that tested their commitment. Their love story began with art and continued with courage, proving that the best partnerships are forged not in comfort, but in the crucible of shared challenges that reveal who people really are when everything else is stripped away. The painting that started it all, the portrait of a woman looking over her shoulder with fear and hope in her eyes, still hangs in the Portland Museum, where visitors often comment on the way the artist captured courage in the face of uncertainty. Victoria sees it whenever she visits the museum, and she always thinks about the moment when she and Marcus first discussed what they saw in those painted eyes. Neither of them could have predicted that they would soon understand that expression from the inside, or that surviving their own moment of looking back, while moving forward, would become the foundation of everything beautiful they would build together.